Shalom, this is Sister Yara Batya, and we're back with another Torah portion for the week. And we are at Genesis, Bereshit, chapter 25 is where we're going to focus at today for this week's portion. And we're talking about two natures, which will inherit the kingdom. That's the title for today. So in last week's portion, we have Abraham's son Isaac. Isaac took a wife. He was able to take a wife, Ribkah. And that's kind of where we ended off in the last portion. And when we get over to chapter 25, I'm going to pick up reading. I'm going to read from chapter 25. I'm going to start at verse 19. And we're going to read down to 34. And this is the genealogy of Yitzhak, which is Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham brought forth Yitzhak. And Yitzhak was 40 years old when he took Ribkah as wife, the daughter of Bethuel the Aramean of Padan Aram, the sister of Laban the Aramean. And Yitzhak prayed to Yahuwah for his wife, because she was barren, and Yahuwah answered his prayer, and Ribkah his wife conceived. And within her the children struggled together. And she said, "If all is right, why am I this way?" So she went to ask Yahuwah, and Yahuwah said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples shall be separated from your body, and one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older serve the younger." And when the days were filled for her to give birth, and see, twins were in her womb. So Ribkah is pregnant. She's told that she's pregnant with twins, and that's why her pregnancy is seeming difficult to her, because she has two twins in her womb that are basically they're struggling. Okay, and she receives the prophecy and the revelation that within her womb is going to come two different nations of people. Okay, and one's going to be stronger than the other, and the older is going to serve the younger. So she's being told this word here. And in verse 24 it says, "And when the days were filled for her to give birth, and see, twins were in her womb. And the first came out red all over, like a hairy garment, so they called his name Esau. And afterward his brother came out with his hand holding on to Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob. And Yitzhak was 60 years old when she bore them. And the boys grew up, and Esau became a man knowing how to hunt, a man of the field, while Jacob was a complete man dwelling in tents." Okay, so it kind of fast forwards and it talks about them growing up. Okay, we have Esau and Jacob, which is Jacob. Okay, so it says, as they grew up, Esau became a man knowing how to hunt, a man of the field, while Jacob was a complete man dwelling in tents. So we're going to take a closer look at that portion, but I'm going to finish reading down to 34. And Yitzhak loved Esau because he ate of his wild game, but Ribkah loved Jacob. And Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. And Esau said to Jacob, "Please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary." That is why his name was called Edom. But Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright today." And Esau said, "Look, I'm going to die, so why should I have birthright?" Then Jacob said, "Swear to me today." And he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Jacob then gave Esau bread and stew of lentils, and he ate and drank, and rose up and left. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So this is a very pivotal moment in the history of our faith, because the firstborn nation is being chosen from these two twin brothers, and this is going to determine the eternal inheritance of the promises that are spoken to Abraham by the Most High. So this is a very important portion of scripture right here, And I want to make sure that we, take notice of that, because the promise was given to Abraham, that would be on his seed, and Abraham had his son Isaac. So now Isaac is getting ready to have two sons, Jacob and Esau, Yaakov and Esau, and whoever has the birthright is going to be the seed of the promise. Okay, so this is really important here. So we're going to focus in on verse number 27. And in this verse, it says that, "And the boys grew up, and Esau became a man knowing how to hunt, a man of the field, while Jacob was a complete man dwelling in tents." So we want to focus in on here, because this verse of scripture here is pulling out the characteristics of Esau and of Jacob. And it's important for us to see and understand the comparison and the contrast between the two of them. So we're going to look a little deeper into what this portion of scripture is showing us, and look at some other aspects that connect to this throughout the scriptures. Okay, so when looking at Esau, it said that he was a man, he became a man knowing how to hunt. Knowing how to hunt. I'm not going to go into the pictographics of the Hebrew in this video, but just to know that the Hebrew word for knowing how to hunt, it says Yadah Sayid. Okay, Yadah, we talked about that knowing. We talked about in a prior portion, knowing in the being beyond a surface level, but intimately acquainted with, entering in something. So we see that Esau had the mindset. He had he was engaged in hunting. This is where his mind was. This is where his heart was. And we have to understand that this isn't something that was out of a necessity for food. And we'll look at that in a moment. It wasn't a necessity for food that was the problem here. This is something that he did more so for sport. And some sources say that hunting also spoke of not just dealing with animals, but it speaks of a mindset that's dealing with violence, and even in battle with man. So it says that Esau became a man knowing how to hunt, a man of the field. A man of the field. So that there's a few different definitions of that Hebrew word there. It's mostly translated field. Also can mean country, land, wild, the ground, the soil. Okay, so he's a man in the field knowing how to hunt. So where else do we see someone that's associated with hunting in the scriptures? If we go back to an earlier portion, also when we talked about the Tower of Babel and how Nimrod was behind that, and the scriptures in Genesis chapter 10, verses 8 and 9, talks about Nimrod being a mighty hunter before Yahuwah. A mighty hunter, a better translation is in the face of Yahuwah. So he was a hunter. He was also of the same type of mindset. So we have Esau being called a hunter. Then we go back to Nimrod being called a hunter. And then when we go forward in history, we're not going to go into that in this video, but we see connections between Esau and Babylon, as well as we talked about Nimrod and the Tower of Babel in Babylon. So we see some connections there when it comes to being a hunter. We know that Nimrod was not walking in the ways of the Most High. And we're going to see this as well dealing with Esau. Okay, and now when we get into Jacob, it says that he was a complete man dwelling in tents. Okay, so where it says complete man is the Hebrew word tam, and in some translations we have it'll say Jacob was a plain man, which is really the only time that is translated as the word plain. but in other instances it's translated as upright, as undefiled, as perfect. So this word tam means to be complete, to be perfect, to be upright, to be wholesome, to be sound, to be morally having integrity. Okay, so we see this word used in reference to Job. If we look at Job chapter 1 verse 1, it says that there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect. It's the same word there, tam, perfect and upright, and one that feared Yahuwah and eschewed evil. Okay, so in Job 1 verse 1, Job 1 verse 1, we see that he is described as being tam, which is translated as perfect in this verse. And let me read that again in my I'm looking at a different translation here, but in my actual translation it says there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and straight, and one who feared Elohim and turned aside from evil. So perfect and straight, or perfect and upright. Okay, so tam. Let's look at another example here. Let's look at Psalms 37. Chapter 37 verse 37 says, mark the perfect man and behold the upright, for the end of that man is peace. Or another translation is, watch the perfect and observe the straight, for the latter end of each is peace. So we have again perfect and straight. This word tam is being used there. Okay, and here's one more that's really interesting that you'll see is really relevant. In Proverbs chapter 29 verse 10, it says, bloodthirsty men hate the perfect and seek the life of the straight. Bloodthirsty men hate the perfect, the tam, and seek the life of the straight. So that's interesting here, because that pretty much gives us a contrast of what we have even looking at Esau and Jacob here. Bloodthirsty is another word that you can connect with Esau. If you think about someone that's has a hunger to hunt, hunger to take the life of, to bring violence to another being. Bloodthirsty men hate the perfect. We'll see the feud between Esau and Jacob as time goes on, and they seek the life of the straight. If we look backwards here, if we go backwards to look at Cain and Abel, Cain and Abel, we see that Cain was a tiller of the ground, and that Abel was a keeper of the sheep. Okay, he was. We'll go back and read that verse in a moment that talks about that. But Cain can be described as being bloodthirsty, hating the perfect. He hated his brother, and that resulted in violence and in murder. Okay, so we're seeing a contrast between two different characters that is showing itself throughout the scriptures. We can see the connection being formed throughout the scriptures in dealing with this contrast between two different natures, two different characteristics, two different driving forces that are within people. So let's go back to Jacob. It says Jacob was a complete man, Tom. So we're looking at someone who's upright, someone who's straight, someone who is wholesome. And then it says that he was dwelling in tents. So what is this saying when it's talking about him dwelling in tents? What's the significance of that? We're going to look at Hebrews chapter 11. And I'm going to start at verse 8. It says, by belief, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out of the place which he was about to receive as an inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going. Verse 9, by belief, he sojourned in the land of promise as a stranger, dwelling in tents with Yitzhak, Isaac, and Yaakov, Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. So it's interesting how it even omits Esau here, but it talks about those who are of the seed of the promise, Isaac and Jacob. Okay, and it talks about them dwelling in tents with Abraham. In verse 10 it says, for he was looking for the city having foundations, whose builder and maker is Elohim. And think about that. Now he left his home place to be a sojourner, meaning he's traveling through lands that he's a stranger of, okay? And they dwelled in tents, and a tent is a temporary dwelling. And they were doing this by faith, by trust in the promise that the Most High had revealed to them. Okay, so he's dwelling in tents versus dwelling in a city or seeking to build his own city. He's waiting for the Most High to lead him to the city that he has built. It says that he was looking for the city having foundations, whose builder and maker is Elohim. Okay, and if we go over to verse 16, it says, but now they long for a better place that is heavenly. Therefore Elohim is not ashamed to be called their Elohim, for he has prepared a city for them. Okay, so they were seeking the city that Elohim was preparing. So they didn't seek to build their own city, their own empire. So they dwelled in tents. So this is a sign of faith. It's a sign of faith. It's a sign of commitment to the promise. Okay, it's a lifestyle that demonstrates their trust in the Most High and in the promise. Okay, so this is what it's alluding to when it talks about Yaakov being one who dwelled in tents. Alright, so he was a complete man. He was righteous. He dwelled in tents. He was in tune with the ways of the Most High. So we can again go back and look and contrast that when it talks about if we look at we looked at Esau and we connected him to Nimrod also. And Nimrod, we know that his goal was to build a great city. He built many cities. He built Babylon. He was building the Tower of Babel. He was behind that force, and they were building contrary. This had nothing to do with the will of the Most High. These were not righteous people that were seeking to build for the Most High. They were doing their own thing. They weren't trusting in the ways of the Most High. They were not in covenant with the Most High. So we see that there. We see it also to a certain extent when we look at Cain in Genesis chapter 4. It says that he built cities. When he left the presence of the Most High, it says in chapter 4 verse 17, it says that he built a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son. So we see him being as one who was building cities also. So we see this common theme, and I don't want to get too deep into this. I just want to pull out the point and draw together the characteristics, draw the lines of the contrast between those who were seeking their own desire and those who were righteous and seeking to fulfill the plan of our Father. Okay? So we see that comparison pretty clearly here, just in that description by itself. But now we also, as we were reading this chapter, we can see some of the characteristics coming out and playing itself out as we even read here of this this short little scenario that is showing. Okay, so it says in verse 29, and Yaakov cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. He came back from hunting. Okay, and Esau said to Yaakov, please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary. That is why his name was called Edom. But Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright today." And Esau said, "Look, I am going to die, so why should I have a birthright?" Okay, so he somewhat flippantly sold his birthright to Jacob for a bowl of soup. Okay, so we see that we see a few things here. What we see overall is very carnal characteristics of Esau. His mind is on things that are not of the Most High. So, due to his hunting and due to what he was doing out in the field, he was willing to come back, and for a bowl of soup, he was willing to feed himself. He was willing to do away with his birthright, which is something that, we just have a small snippet here, but there were things also leading up to this point. But then it says in verse 34 that he despised his birthright. And so I want to take a look at this birthright and what the significance was of the birthright. So we see that Esau despised his birthright, but we also at the same time see that Jacob had his mind set on it. He was waiting for the opportunity to be able to take possession of the birthright. And so what is the birthright? The birthright was that of the firstborn. So in culture at this time, the firstborn son was the one who would inherit the birthright, who it was the natural possession of the father's estate. So in the father's absence, the firstborn son would be the one who took control, who took authority, who received a double portion, and then the other sons would receive their portions after that. So the first one had the birthright, they received the authority, they received the double portion of the father's inheritance. And then if there are any other sons, they would go forth from that. But the firstborn had that right, had that authority, had that right to the possessions of the father. Okay, so, and we see the connection between firstborn and birthright in the Hebrew words. The Hebrew word for birthright is Bekorah, and the Hebrew word for firstborn is Bekor. Okay, so Bekor is translated firstborn, and Bekorah is translated birthright. Okay, so we see the obvious connection there between those two things. So the firstborn had the birthright. So that was culturally, okay, that was the culture, that was what was laid out. However, and for the sake of time, I'm trying not to go into anything different, but you'll see throughout scripture, you will see that often the Most High would choose one of the other sons outside of the firstborn based on their character, whether it was upright and seeking the face of Yah versus those who were not upright. So the Most High would not, in when it came to his divine plan, okay, and when it came to the promise, okay, he would always choose the son that was righteous over top of the firstborn son if the firstborn son was not righteous. Okay, so while there was a cultural mandate, when it came to the things of the Most High would override that. And it's a common theme throughout scripture. You look at the same example, Cain and Abel, Cain and Habel. Cain was the firstborn, the oldest, okay, but he was not righteous, okay. And we're looking at Jacob and Esau. Esau was the firstborn. They were twins, but Esau was born first, and we see that he's going to be rejected. He's been rejected for receiving the birthright, and we're going to continue to see that pattern throughout the scriptures. We saw it with Ishmael and Yitzhak, Isaac. Even though there was different mothers, Ishmael was the firstborn of Isaac. Okay, but he was not the son of the promise. Okay, so he did not receive the promise. He did not receive the birthright from Abraham. Okay, we see this with Ephraim and Manasseh. We see this as a common pattern. Okay, so we'll look at that as we're going through future Torah portions. So keep these things in mind. These are things, as you're studying the scriptures, keep these patterns in mind, because the Most High is trying to teach us things. He's trying to get us to see things. What I want us to see in this portion is the connection and the pattern of righteous people versus those who are not righteous, and the patterns we're seeing throughout scripture and the characteristics, so we can look at ourselves and look at the world around us and identify these things, so that we are aligning ourselves with the right characteristics and the right things, because our culture can hide things. Okay, our culture can give us these illusions and these facades of things that we should be pursuing and paint it as being good. But when we see these same things in the scripture, we see what the Most High thought about it. We can make a better, we can discern better and make better decisions based off of those patterns that are revealed to us. Okay. So let's look at something else real quick that Esau did, that is revealing of his character. So we saw the pain that Abraham went through to make sure that his son Isaac did not marry a Canaanite woman, and that he married a woman that was of his people. Okay? So let's look at Genesis chapter 26, verse 34. And it says, "And when Esau was 40 years old, he took as wives Yehudith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. And they were a bitterness of spirit to Yitzhak and Ribkah." Okay, so Esau goes and he marries Canaanite women. He goes and he marries Canaanite women. And that's a big contrast to what we looked at in our last portion of how important it was for Abraham to find a wife amongst his people, to not marry the Canaanite women. So we see something else here that is just very telling. And if we fast forward to chapter 27, verse 46, it says, "And Ribkah said to Yitzhak, I am disgusted with my life because of the daughters of Heth," which is Esau's wives. "If Yaakov takes a wife from the daughters of Heth, like these who are the daughters of the land, what is my life to me?" Okay, so she and they are completely disgusted by their son Esau marrying these women, these Canaanite women, who they served other, they were idolaters. So I'm sure that they were bringing that into their presence and bringing it into their camp and into their midst. So in chapter 28, verse 1, it says, "And Yitzhak called Yaakov and blessed him and commanded him and said to him, do not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan." Okay, and he tells him, go and, go amongst our people, basically, to find a wife for yourself. Okay, and he gives a blessing to him and tells him, that the Most High is going to make him fruitful and increase him, and it will that he'll become an assembly of people. Okay, and he gives him this blessing, and places this blessing on him. Okay, and commands him to not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan, from Canaan. All right, so we see this. So let's go. Let's look at in verse 8, in chapter 28, verse 8. It says, "So Esau saw that the daughters of Canaan did not please his father Yitzhak, and Esau went to Ishmael and took Mahalah, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nabaioth, to be his wife, besides the wives he had." So now he goes to the Ishmaelites and takes a daughter from amongst those people. Okay, so we know that Ishmael is also not, there's conflict between Yaakov and Ishmael as we move forward. Okay, the Ishmaelites and the nation of Israel. Okay, So we don't see that he went amongst Abraham's descendants or Abraham's family as Jacob does, to take a wife for himself. So we just continue to see how Esau is aligning himself in the way that he's aligning himself, and how he follows his own ways, his own heart, his own lust, versus following the ways and the plan. He has no mind for the plan of the Most High. He has no mind for the birthright, for the promise, the inheritance. His mind is not set on those things. But we see that Jacob's mind is set on those things. He takes his wife. He was tricked into his first wife Leah, and then receives his wife Rachel, and which is from he goes back to Laban, all right, and takes his wife from there. So we see that he is seeking after the ways of the Most High and seeking after the promise. It has his mind set on those things, all right. So we know that ultimately Isaac, Yitzhak, he gives the blessing to, basically, even though Esau gets a level of blessing, the firstborn blessing ends up going to Yaakov. Yaakov and Rivka kind of I'm gonna say manipulated, or kind of they made some things happen. Hopefully you've read the portion. I'm not going to read all of that today, but if you haven't read the portion, and you're not familiar with it, read the portion and see that they kind of worked together for this thing to manifest in the way that it did. But we also know that this was the plan of the Most High, and she was trying to bring forth the prophecy that was given to her, that the younger was going to be the one that was going to receive the promise and the birthright. Okay, so we know that that's the ultimate outcome. So we've taken a look and we've compared and we've contrasted the characteristics of Esau, the characteristics of Jacob, Jacob, and we see that two different characters, two different natures. All right, we see that compare and contrast, and one despised their birthright, and one embraced it and lived worthy of that birthright. All right, so I want to bring this home, because as we're studying Torah, we want to understand our history as Hebrews. We want to understand the foundation of our faith, and we want to apply it to where we are culturally, and apply it personally as we're looking at our walk, as the Most High is revealing things to us. So as we see these two natures, the title of this was "Which One Will Inherit the Kingdom?" Okay, so we have to compare ourselves, and ask ourselves, are we more aligned with the characteristics of Esau, who did not have faith? Back over in Hebrews chapter 12, in verse 16, it says, "Lest there be anyone who whores, or any profane ones that are like Esau, who for a single meal sold his birthright. For you know that afterward, when he wished to inherit the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no place for repentance, though he sought it with tears." Okay, it said, "See that no one among you was profane like Esau." In another version it says godless like Esau. Okay, so as we compare ourselves, are we, spending our time indulged in carnality? Because that's what Esau was focused on. He was bloodthirsty. He's out hunting unnecessarily. He had food. Okay, and I meant to go back to the verse where it said that it was in, let's see, in Genesis 27, verse 9, it's talked about how when Rivka was trying to, they were trying to get back before Esau. Isaac had told him to go and get some game, hunt some fresh game, and he went out to do that. So Rivka tried to come and make a stew before Esau got back. So she sent Jacob to go out and to get the goats. Okay, she sent him to go get the goats from their flock to make the soup with. So You know, and another point that Yaakov was a shepherd. Okay, we look at Yaakov, he was a shepherd. Abel, Habel was also a shepherd. Okay, so look at these themes. Okay, so they had their own flocks. So, but when we look at that, we see that it was unnecessary for Esau to be out hunting. It wasn't based on the need for food. So, are we spending our time doing unnecessary things? Okay, look at this. Could be in anything. This could be seeking financial gain where it's unnecessary. This could be eating in gluttony. Okay, this could be the pursuit of anything that takes us outside of the will of the Father, the outside of His plan for us. You know, so we indulged in carnality and carnal things that are unnecessary. You know, do we have a hunter's appetite? Do we have a lust inside of us to destroy, to break down, to hunt, to, you know, are we seeking to slander people? Are we seeking for ways to trick our brothers and our sisters? Are we looking for ways to, you know, tear them down and destroy them? You know, which leads to murder. Okay, are we harboring that type of violence, you know, towards our own flesh? We know that Esau never let go of what happened between him and Jacob and losing the inheritance. So he harbored that violence, and it went throughout his kingdom, throughout the Edomites, in that violence, in that bitterness towards the nation of Israel. Okay, so are we, you know, despising our birthright? Our birthright. You know, are we being impulsive and just allowing temporary things to keep us from what the Most High has destined for us to be able to walk in? Okay, are we being impulsive like Esau, and for the slightest thing, the slightest fulfillment, for a bowl of soup, you know, for fulfillment, you know, even we may feel like we need it, you know, or we're going to just die, like he felt like he needed it, or he was just going to die if he didn't get sustained at that moment, you know. So are we willing to forfeit our birthright for temporary things? We are of the seed of Abraham. We're of the seed of Abraham. Okay, so what are we forfeiting? You know, what are we allowing to cause us to forfeit, you know, our rights, you know, as the seed? Okay, so we see, you know, throughout the New Testament, throughout the Brit Hadashah, that it continually speaks of us having these two natures, the flesh versus the renewed spirit. And the scriptures prompt us to work out our soul salvation, because the flesh constantly wars against the spirit, and that the flesh will not inherit the kingdom. Flesh will not inherit the kingdom. Okay, that's both physically, for our physical flesh, and also those who are of the flesh will not inherit the kingdom. Only spirit will get to see Yah. Only our actual spirit, and only those who walk in the spirit will get to see Yah. Only the meek will inherit the kingdom. So those who struggle with El, Yisrael, those who struggle with El, are called to be the first fruits of the earth. So we hear Israel spoken of as being Yah's firstborn son. Okay, the firstborn, the first fruits of the earth. So those who strive and overcome their flesh through the spirit are those who will get to inherit that birthright. Okay, and we're inheriting that with Yahusha, with our Messiah. Okay, so this is really significant. Okay, so we know that Adam was the firstborn of the earth. Okay, Adam was the firstborn of all flesh. All right, but Yahusha, Messiah, is the firstborn of the spirit. Adam was rejected and has inherited death. Okay, Adam fell, you know, and placed himself outside of, it was kicked out of the garden, you know, what happened with the fall of Adam. Okay, and inherited death. Through Adam all die. So we have inherited death through Adam. And all those who are in him and found in him, found only in the flesh, are going to inherit death with him. And that will be, the final destination. So with Yahusha, he has inherited life. And those who are in him will become partakers in that life as joint heirs. So Yahusha was the firstborn of the Spirit. And those who are in him will inherit that life and will become partakers in that life as a joint heir with him. Okay, so I want us to see the connection here and the significance here when it comes to the firstborn and when it comes to the inheritance. Okay, Yahusha is the firstborn of the Spirit. Okay, he's the first fruits of who he is, who we are becoming. Okay, he's the first fruits of those who will be taken from the earth to inherit the kingdom. So he has inherited the kingdom. All power and authority has been given to him. And we, as we are in him, become joint heirs with him in that inheritance. Yahusha is the firstborn son of the kingdom, which indicates that his inheritance, and his blessing. He's the firstborn of the kingdom and has inherited all that the Father has. Okay? Think about that. He's inherited all that the Father has. This is patterned after what we see happening physically, where the firstborn son receives the Father's inheritance in a double portion of the Father's inheritance. Okay, so he has inherited all that the Father has, and he distributes it as the master of it. So we call him Lord, we call him Master. He's the master of the Father's inheritance. Okay, he's received a double portion. He's received, the right to distribute what the master has to the other sons. Okay, so we have to go to him as those sons. We go to him to receive our portion as joint heirs with him. So he has the authority. The authority has been given to him. We've always looked at this in the spiritual sense, and it is spiritual, but look at it in the physical sense that we just talked about with the birthright and the inheritance in the physical realm, and to help you understand how that relates to the spiritual realm. It's connected. It's the same thing. Okay, it's the same, and I'm hoping that this will help some of our brothers and sisters who reject Yahusha because they don't understand what's going on. Because we look at the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament scriptures, in such a Western mindset. But if you put it back in its original context, you can clearly see this picture of why do we have to go to Yahusha? Why is his role so significant? But also still understanding that now we are joint heirs with him. We also have a portion of that inheritance, but he's the firstborn. Okay, he has a greater portion of that. Okay, he's the master of it. All right, so, and this is given to him by the Father. This authority, this inheritance, this blessing is given to him by the Father because he was worthy of, through his life and his walk, to be able to walk in this inheritance and to receive this blessing. All right. All right, so let's read some scripts. 1 Corinthians 15 verses, we'll start at verse 20. But now Messiah has been raised from the dead and has become the first fruit of those having fallen asleep. For since death is through a man, resurrection of the dead is also through a man. For as all die in Adam, so also all shall be made alive in Messiah, and each in his own order. Messiah the firstfruits, then those who are of Messiah at his coming. Then the end, when he delivers up the kingdom to Elohim the Father, when he has brought to naught all rule and all authority and power. For he has to reign until he has put all enemies under his feet. The last enemy to be brought to naught is death, for he has put all under his feet. But when he says all are put under him, it is clear that he who put all under him is accepted, meaning it's not, of course, it's not talking about the Most High. It's not subject to Messiah. Everything's under him, under the Most High. Okay, and when all are made subject to him, then the Son himself shall also be subject to him who put all under him, which is the Most High, in order that Elohim be all in all. Okay. Alright, in Matthew 28, verse 18, the Messiah, Yahusha, it says, and Yahusha came up and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Okay, all authority has been given to the Messiah Yahusha. Okay. In John chapter 16, in verse 15, Yahusha Messiah says that all that the Father has is mine. Okay, that is why I said he takes from what is mine and announces it to you. All that the Father has is mine. And then in chapter 17, in verse, I'll read verse 1 and 2, it says, Yahusha said these words and lifted up his eyes to the heaven and said, Father, the hour has come. Esteem your Son, so that your Son also might esteem you, as you have given him authority over all flesh, that he should give everlasting life to all whom you have given him. Okay. Also, you can read through John chapter 14 and start to take notice when you think about the things that are saying in his name, in the name. Understand that name in these contexts in the Brit Hadashah are usually speaking of authority. Okay, in his authority. Alright, so keep that in mind. And hopefully I'll do a separate video at some point that kind of goes more into this topic. But just for the sake of time for this Torah portion, I'm just giving a few scriptures here. Alright, so I think I'm going to end with this. We're going to go to Romans chapter 8. And I'm going to start at verse 5, and this kind of brings together the two topics of just the two different natures and also our inheritance in Christ. It says in Messiah, for those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the matters of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit, the matters of the Spirit. Those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the matters of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit, the matters of the Spirit. Okay, for the mind of the flesh is death, but the mind of the Spirit is life and peace. Because the mind of the flesh is enmity towards Elohim, for it does not subject itself to the Torah of Elohim, neither indeed is it able. And those who are in the flesh are unable to please Elohim. But you are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if indeed the Spirit of Elohim dwells in you. And if anyone does not have the Spirit of Messiah, this one is not his. And if Messiah is in you, the body is truly dead on account of sin, but the Spirit is life on account of righteousness. And if the Spirit of him who raised Yahusha from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Messiah from the dead shall also give life to your mortal bodies through his Spirit dwelling in you. So then, brothers, we are not debtors to the flesh, to live according to the flesh. For if you live according to the flesh, you are going to die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you shall live. For as many as are led by the Spirit of Elohim, these are the sons of Elohim. For you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of Elohim, and if children, also heirs, truly heirs of Elohim, and co-heirs with Messiah, if indeed we suffer with him, in order that we also be exalted together. Hallelujah. Alright, so go back and read those scriptures and meditate on that, and pray for the Most High to give you insight on the connection between these things. And we just really just scratched the surface of it with this study today. So do go deeper into it and read over the scriptures, read over the portion, and may the Most High continue to be a light. May his word be a light to your feet, and may he enlighten your path as you seek to walk out this walk in the Spirit and in truth. So I will see you in the next video. Shalom.